The following is a Spirit Street production.
Well, Big 12 football is just around the corner. Big 12 Media Days is in the rearview mirror, and a lot is going on in conference realignment. And today we have one of the foremost experts in all things Big 12's, CBS Sports' own Shehan Jeyarajah. I think I got that right, but we're still going to start the show. Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders.
Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Again, I'm not Brien Hanley. We are brothers, but we are not. I'm not the same person. I know it's very confusing, but he is on vacation. I am sitting in this week, and I brought in one of the people I respect most in my business. My friend Shehan. Look, you worked your way up. You did it the old way. Well, not really the old way. I mean, maybe it wasn't Texas working for Dave Campbell is the old way now that I think about it, but non-traditional media in some ways, and right on into CBS eventually. Give me your background, you wonderful Baylor grad.
Well, so when I was in college, I was there. I always tell people, like you said, I went to Baylor. I was there at a very good time. I came in right after RG3 won the Heisman Trophy. I left right before Art Briles was fired as the head coach there in 2016. And so during my time there, I got to do a lot of like outside work. So I was a stringer for the Dallas Morning News. I did all that sort of stuff. And I was lucky when I left college, I got an opportunity at Cox Media Groups whenever they launched the Die Hard sites. I covered the Big 12 for them back then. Moved on to Dave Campbell's Texas football, had thankfully a lot of success there. And now I'm here at CBS Sports as sort of, in some ways the Big 12 guy in national media. So it's been fun. Obviously I've been, like you mentioned, around the state of Texas, around the Big 12 for really since like 2013 or so when I started covering football. And Lord knows it's changed a lot since then.
No doubt. Yeah, those were great times to be a Baylor student. Man, that had to be fun. Let's talk about Big 12 Media Days. It was, first of all, it was hard to tell if it was different because it was in Las Vegas and not as much media in what was a traditional Big 12 footprint had access to it easily without flying. So yeah, the crowd was down because of that, but you pull Texas and Oklahoma out, you lose some more crowd. But I also noticed, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I was walking in the wrong circles, but there didn't seem to be much national media. Many of the regulars that would frequent Big 12 Media Days. It strikes me now that everyone's burning their powder on the Big 12 or Big 10 and the SEC. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that there was a decent amount of national media there. So just going through my people, I mean, so Dennis Dodd and myself were there, of course, from CBS. I know that from ESPN, Dave Wilson came through. He, of course, does a lot of stuff for them. Pete Thamel was there. Stuart Mandel was there from The Athletic. Chris Vanini. So, I mean, I think that there was maybe a slightly lesser amount, partially because Vegas is just less of a convenient spot to go to. But, here's the other piece as well, is that when you look at, what the Pac-12 and the Pac-2 decided to do, when you look at Mountain West, they built a lot around the idea that people are going to stick around who are from national media, from Big 12 Media Days. So I think, look, there are probably a handful of people who didn't come or who prioritized going to, one to Dallas where SEC Media Days were, which I also went to, and also to Indianapolis where Big 10 are. But I think overall I didn't feel like there was like a huge drop in the number of national media members who were there.
So give me your impression after those 2 days, a little hectic with 8 schools a day. But give me your impression of this conference. And it finally felt like a conference to me now that we actually had something together. I know the ADs and chancellors and presidents have done that kind of thing, but a public setting like that, it really began to feel so much more tangible.
Yeah, well, I think that, like you said, these are 16 schools that are at least together for the foreseeable future, right? Where there isn't a lame duck, there isn't, a group that's trying to very actively get out of the league. Of course, one or two maybe would like to be in the Big Ten, but again, I don't think that's coming anytime soon. And so because of that, I think that it was a conference where everybody seemed pretty pleased to be there. Where the vibes were very good. I think that the chemistry was very good between all of the schools. Even with the 4 new additions who obviously coming from the Pac-12, like it wasn't, I'm sure, their first choice to have to leave a dying Pac-12. Like they were very open and forward about the fact that, like, hey, we're happy to be here.
Yep.
We think that the commissioner is doing a great job. We think that the member institutions in this league are fantastic. And so, and I feel like since 2021, right? Because the news broke that Texas and Oklahoma were leaving after Big 12 Media Days in 2021. Since then, I feel like there's just been so much camaraderie between one, the hateful 8 who remain, and 2, with the teams that have come in, right? The 4 teams that entered last year are, I think, really embracing everything about this opportunity. And the 4 Pac-12 schools, again, I think we're very open and forward about the fact that, like, look, yeah, I mean, we didn't get here the way that we wanted to, but I think we're happy to be here and part of the Big 12. So overall, like you said, it felt like a really cohesive conference. One other thing that I'll mention too, as a media member, is like, out of the 16 schools, let's put Colorado to the side for a second because they're their own thing. Everybody else is just felt happy to be covered, right? Like felt they got it. Like everything was easy at Big 12 Media Days. You could grab whoever you wanted. I had a great conversation with Avery Johnson at Kansas State. I had a great conversation with Tetrariah McMillan, the wide receiver at Arizona. And not every media day is like that, but I think Big 12 gets it. And I think that really 1 through 16, each of the schools also get it in a big way too.
In the landscape of conference realignment, these 4 schools coming in from the Pac are really kind of your first reluctant change. They didn't want to change, and I understand why. It was a great conference, but the circumstances around them forced them to look elsewhere. And I think I've been, going back and forth with some Utah fans at times about, you got to live where your feet are, guys. Come on, quit trying to look at something else when you just joined this. But it has to be hard on them. Utah in particular, because of their history, was so proud of what they accomplished in the Pac-12. So I think it's just going to be a matter of getting on the field and start playing some football games, and we're going to see all that dissipate a little bit.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's funny, right? You look at these schools, Arizona and Arizona State have a bit more history in the Pac-12, but even they weren't founding members by any stretch of the imagination. Colorado only moves about a decade ago. Utah gets let in to the Pac-12 because of realignment in the past. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're Utah, especially, like, geographically, it made so much sense to be in this league where you were. And so I understand some of the reluctance. And for a program like Utah, you talk about how far they've come over the past 10 to 15 years in the power conferences, and even the 10 years before that, whenever, Urban Meyer and Kyle Whittingham were leading them to top 5 in the country type rankings. I understand this feeling of like, well, we don't want to go back. We don't want to feel like we're falling behind. But I think that the people at Utah, right, the actual players on campus, the coaches, the administrators understand, hey, look, we have an opportunity now to be an integral part of this league, to be a team that contends very consistently, like a Kansas State, like an Oklahoma State, has access to the college football playoff with the way that things are going to work. So, look, I mean, I think the other piece too is that Kyle Whittingham kind of alluded to. He said before, I'm probably not going to coach past 65. Well, he's 64 right now, and I think that there's a lot of stuff that they put into this roster to maybe try to maximize this team. I think that he sort of was like, well, I'm just going to roll with the punches. Cause I think a part of it is, I'm certainly not breaking any news here, but this might be his last go round or two as well. So I think that, like you said, I think that Utah, the institution and the athletic department and the coaches and the players are very much willing to sort of accept where their feet are right this second. And it'll be interesting over the next 2 or 3 years, how they, first of all, like the league and like being in it, and 2, kind of what opportunities they're able to create from it.
Yeah, it's I look at Utah as a perfect example of one of the benefits of realignment. And by that, what I mean is, people judge programs and schools on where they are at the moment, and don't look at where they could be in the conference. because, if you just want to throw it back like everyone throws Cincinnati and UCF and Houston joining, those aren't Power 5 schools. Well, neither was Utah or TCU at one point. And now Utah's had a great number of Pac-12 appearances, championships. TCU's played for the national championship. We got to kind of set aside what the moment is and look at what the capability is. And that's kind of where I feel like the strength of the Big 12 is. We don't know how big UCF will get. It could. Houston with Willie Fritz is scary. And of course, Cincinnati has a proud athletics history that now is going to be better financed. I think these three schools could be really well placed 5-10 years down the road. And of course, BYU is BYU. So I just feel like this conference got really tough for the future. There's going to be some growth that takes place.
No doubt. And I think that one thing too, especially when I look at the non-Utah Pac-12 schools coming in, is that there is going to be an urgency that I don't think existed in the Pac-12, right? Like when you look at the Big 12, everybody, especially in the legacy Big 12, like everybody is a striver. Everybody wants to elevate as much as they can. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of investment. There's a lot of care from the fan bases. And for various reasons, that was less the case in the Pac-12, right? You don't have a program like Cal, let's say, in the Big 12, right? You don't have a program like what Colorado's been for most of the past decade in the Big 12, and part of it is going to be spurred by the fact that, the entire thing just blew up and teams lost out on opportunities because their athletic departments weren't ready for this moment and thought kind of that the train would just continue. But I do also think that that when you're in a room with people who understand, and by this I mean other Big 12 athletic directors who understand, look, this is what football can do for you. This is what basketball can do for you. This is what athletics can do for you. I think the investment changes and kind of has to change in a lot of ways. So I see, certainly the way that in the past year or two, a program like Arizona has invested, the way that Colorado kind of has said, we really need to do something to prove that we're willing to be serious on this stage. And I think that even to look at the legacy schools, right? Like Kansas is funneling a lot of money into football because they're seeing the benefits, especially in this long-term space. With the 4 schools that joined from the group of 5 last year, similar deal, right? Like Houston, I got a chance to talk to administrators from each of the schools when they joined the league back in 2023. And one of the things that I guess former now athletic director at Houston, Chris Pesman, told me is we were essentially spending money that we did not have because we had to know, look, if we're going to have an opportunity to exist in the long-term future of college football, we have to be ready for that moment now. And so I think that, the 4 schools that joined last year didn't have instant football success, but when you look at the operations that each of them built using, again, money that they largely didn't have over the past decade, these are the benefits.
Yep. It's going to be scary good at some point. It really is. But someone has to lose. Speaking of that, who did you pick to win the Big 12 championship?
I did pick Utah. So the thing that I think about Utah, and I've gotten plenty of messages. This is not me saying that Utah is going to run the Big 12 for the next decade, certainly. But I think that when you look at this 2024 team, this is potentially a peaking roster. And when I look at the Big 12 and the contenders, first of all, if you look at the next 5 to 10 years, if you told me that 12 different teams appear in the Big 12 title game, I don't think it would be that much of a shock. There are so many teams that have the potential to reach that level and be on that stage. And so with that context, I think that it's really going to be about which rosters, which coaching staffs, which players are kind of on the upward, trajectory at that time, or who's kind of at the end of their development curve in a lot of ways. And so for me, Utah is that team in 2024. They bring back Cameron Rising and Brant Keithy. And look, you look last year, they basically had an Iowa level offense because of some of the injuries that they had. And they still managed to win 8 games just on the strength of their defense and like doing enough with a converted safety playing running back. Well, one, I don't think they're going to have as bad injury luck as they did last year. But two, I think that they also added more depth on that side of the ball. I think an underrated addition this offseason was Utah adding transfer quarterback Sam Heward from Cal Poly, a former 5-star player who started all of last year at Cal Poly and got some good experience under his belt. That to me is just a level of backup quarterback play that they did not have last year. Last year, they were playing a walk-on whenever Cameron Rising was hurt. They added more downfield threats. I look at a player like Dorian Singer coming in from USC, who didn't play a lot at USC, but was really good at Arizona the year before that. And then defensively, they should still be really good. So I think that they just have more pathways to win than just about anybody in the Big 12. But I'll tell you what, I mean, trying to figure out 1 through 6, like if I was doing odds in the Big 12, I mean, I think that I'd have all of those teams essentially between like plus 300 and plus 700. They are so close together. I think that at the end of the day, while Utah is my pick to be number 1, I mean, really, I could see all of those top 6 teams being right on the 7-2 line, maybe one game above, maybe one game below, and some tiebreakers making all the difference. So while I pick Utah number 1, I mean, it is going to be very competitive all the way to the end of the season.
Okay, who's your school? Because we see this in the Big 12 almost every year. In some ways, it was West Virginia last year that all of a sudden pops up out of the middle of the pack or the bottom of the pack in West Virginia's case. To be a contender in the conference. I think Iowa State's that team for me this year. Who do you got?
Yeah, Iowa State is definitely my team. I feel like I've talked about them so much this offseason that, like, if you've listened to any of my stuff, they're barely even a dark horse anymore. But,
Yep.
I think that what you have to look at for this team is they got written off after their 1-2 start to last season and their struggles in non-conference play. They refined some things. They changed some of what they did offensively. And I think that they found their level in a lot of ways. They finished 6-3 in conference play last year and are now number 1 nationally in returning production. Defensively, I mean, outside of Texas last year, this was the best defense in the conference, and they essentially bring everybody back. Offensively, look, their offensive line play, I mean, it's been kind of a consistent issue at that program. It's hard to recruit, of course, good offensive linemen to Iowa State. But I think that with the production that they return on the offensive line, they should be, let's say, an average unit. And if they are able to get that, I mean, the rest of the talent around this offense has a chance to be pretty special. So at the quarterback position, Rocco Becht, I think, provided a real sort of upside after Hunter Deckers was dismissed from the team. They have weapons in Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, who I think should be 2 of the better receivers in the league. The swing to me comes from whether Abu Sama, the running back, has a chance to be a down-to-down type player or whether it's going to be more of a boomer bust type player. If they're able to be consistent down-to-down, this is as good as any team in the Big 12. And just to give another team as well, I think that UCF, similar sort of deal, right? It's going to be about whether their offensive line comes along. This was a struggling unit for them last year, but the skill talent that they have is unbelievable. KJ Jefferson coming in from Arkansas at quarterback, Kobe Hudson at wide receiver, RJ Harvey and Penny Boone in the backfield. This could be one of the most dynamic offenses in college football next season if that offensive line comes along.
Yep. I agree with you. I agree with everything. All I know is this: if there's a blizzard and Iowa State's playing in it this year, I'm betting on Iowa State. They're apparently
you guys would know, unfortunately. You guys would know.
I mean, if they want to play like instead of going to Dublin, they could go to like the Arctic and play a game. They would absolutely crush everyone. Let's take a short break right now on the Big 12 Insiders. We'll be back on the other side to ask about Colorado and Deion's impact on this conference, and of course, all the stuff going on at the ACC. I'm Fitz, and we'll be right back.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to Studio 73.
I'm Tim Fitzgerald here in the Cats and Dogs studio in Manhattan. Big B's on vacation, and we're joined by Shehan Jeyarajah. I'm just going to say it real fast. That's my new approach. Is Jeyarajah. There we go. I got it. I'm going to count it as a victory. It was obvious at Big 12 Media Days that Coach Brien is a magnet. I did not join in on the pack that was following him around, but there's no denying he brings eyeballs to this conference. And while Colorado was probably always going to return to the Big 12, if this went down with the Pac-12, his presence redefines how important Colorado really is for a conference like the Big 12 that's seeking eyeballs because the two biggest brands just left.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was thrilled when my colleague Dennis Dodd said I'll be on Deion duty today, so I didn't have to worry about all of that.
Right,
that was
with you.
one of the great conversations I got to have in the past few weeks. No, but I mean, it was stark, right? In the past at Big 12 Media Days, it's Texas usually that's kind of just being followed around, that has this pack of people. But like, this has been such a funny couple of maybe year or so, because this is the sort of thing that's just like, there is being football famous and there's being a celebrity.
Mhm.
And Deion Sanders is not football famous. Deion Sanders is a celebrity. And I think that just the way that when he's like, Mike Gundy is a football famous guy, right? He's very well known in college football. He ain't getting followed around quite like that. And so I think that for the conference over the next year, especially, because look, I don't know how this next year is going to go for them. If they win 5 or 6 games, I think that 6 would be a great success for what he took over and for this team. But if they miss a bowl, let's say, and then Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter leaves, I don't know that they maintain the same level of attention in following years. So I think that this is a big opportunity for the Big 12. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, certainly just to drive viewership to Colorado games, right? The fact that this has been such a draw. I think that the number was they had 5 of the top 16 most watched regular season games in college football last year, which is just crazy. Like they were generating essentially like Iron Bowl numbers for a team that finished 4-8. That's crazy. But I think the other piece of it too, if you're the Big 12 office, if you're Brett Yormark, is, well, I'm going to really try to blow out the fact that people are watching these games to market the Big 12 and to market some of the teams in the league, right? Like, I know, like, I think it's week 5, they play against UCF. And like, man, market the hell out of the fact that you've got Gus. Market the hell out of the fact that you've got one of the most fun offenses in college football. I know that in the latter half of the season, they play the vast majority of contenders in the Big 12. That means that they're going to get a chance to hopefully bring viewership to a lot of these teams. And apologies if I misspeak on which games, but I think they play Kansas State, right? Like Avery Johnson, blow out this game. This is a huge opportunity. Jalen Daniels in Kansas, blow out this game. Utah, blow out this game, right? So like, I think that there's a way for this to drive interest in these players. And I mean, to mention a player like Avery Johnson, of course, this is a player who's going to be back in 2025 as well. So it allows you to maybe use some of this residual attention to build stars within your league that won't just help you in 2024, but potentially have a chance to help you long term.
I think one of the things that could be the Big 12's identity is this appears to be the quarterback conference. There are a lot of not just good quarterbacks in this conference, but exciting. The type of quarterbacks people really want to tune in and watch because they're just so athletic, they can make things happen. Or in the case of Cam Rising, just efficient and a great leader. I'm just blown away by the quality of quarterbacks in this conference. And considering 2 of the best quarterbacks in the Big 10 this year are Big 12 transfers. It's remarkable how this quarterback thing's going on in the Big 12, but I think that's something to market.
No, I think so too. I will push back. I think that this is the conference of running backs. They've got 4 of the top 6 returning rushers in college football in 2024, including Ollie Gordon, the Doak Campbell Award, Doak Walker. I always mix those up, but the best running back award winner, of course. So I do think that that's going to play a part. But the other thing, when you mentioned the quarterbacks and some of the stars, just in general to market, is that there are some like really interesting stories and personalities. Shedeur Sanders, of course, being a top attraction among them, but like the friendship between Noah Fafita and Tetairoa McMillan at Arizona. They were high school teammates who decided to come together along with Jacob Manu, who's a linebacker for them, right? Like that's such a relationship. Avery Johnson, of course, bringing Dylan Edwards back into the fold. He's going to be somebody that I think is easy to market. Jalen Daniels, if he's able to stay healthy, just such a tremendous personality. Somebody who, it sucks that he wasn't able to be this national star last season because of his injuries. So I think that top to bottom, I mean, even if you kind of go down, right, Garrett Green, like just a fun, fascinating personality, doing some stuff we haven't seen in a while at West Virginia. DeQuan Finn at Baylor coming in, MAC Player of the Year from last year. So I think you just look top to bottom, and yes, there's a lot of talent, but there's also just a lot of intrigue and interesting stories. And Baron Morton, a kid from West Texas, is starting at Texas Tech, right? So there'll be sort of this fight in order to emerge from that group. Like I was asked who is the best quarterback in the Big 12 heading into the year, and I at first I said Noah Fafita, but then it's really close. There's a lot of good quarterbacks heading into 2024. And by the way, like two guys who would be near the top of my list are Cam Rising and Jalen Daniels, and we don't know who they are in 2024 because they're both coming off injuries. So
yeah,
it's going to be a fun year. And even more than just quarterbacks, like there are star players in the Big 12 that I think that the league has to be really smart about marketing.
I agree. I think they have an opportunity here. And we know that Brett Yormark's aggressive, so he'll probably be on top of that. A selfish question here as in someone outside of the Kansas State circle, but, familiar with it. What do you make of the Avery Johnson build-up, whatever you want to call it? It's almost a phenomenon now.
I agree. I was listening to Split Zone Duo, and one thing that they said is like, man, if this was happening at Ohio State or one of the big boy, like he would have been like on TV every single day this year, right? Like he would be like oversaturated if it was like at a program like that. But I think that's what makes it so interesting and so fun is like people in the Big 12, we know what's about to happen. He is the kind of player that Kansas State, I mean, obviously they've had some great players, but this is the kind of quarterback, especially that hasn't been around since Colin Klein, maybe if you want to go even further back to Michael Bishop, right? Like he is just such a dynamic athlete. The fact that he, one, chose to commit as a top 100 player, and two, decided to stick around. And three, by the way, people are going to tell you which way about, how this thing went. But I think that everybody kind of was around knows like Kansas State prioritized keeping Avery Johnson over the guy who's going to be the starting quarterback at Ohio State. That's a hell of a story when you talk about what he has a chance to be long term. And so, I think that he is one of those players who can be a face of the program. And especially I look, again, I picked Utah to win the league this year. I think that Kansas State, I had number 2 on my preseason ballot, but 2 to 6, it's going to be real close. Like there's a chance, that it's closer to 5 or 6. But I think in 2025, right? Like I would say over the next 2 years, Kansas State has a really good chance with Avery Johnson to be somewhere in the college football playoff. And if that happens, I mean, what kind of long-term impact could this have on Kansas State University, on that coaching staff? Like this has been largely a Big 12 conference story about the success that Kansas State has had. I think that there's absolutely the potential in the next year or two because of a player like Avery Johnson for this story and this job that Chris Kleiman is doing to truly break contain.
I don't know if you saw the New York Post, who they picked for the Heisman winner. It was Avery. And I'm like, wow, okay, New York, slow down now.
Yeah.
So as a guy who covers that.
I will say, right, I picked them number 2 in the conference. Like, and I mean, a lot of that is just 1, respect for Avery, and 2, respect for Chris Kleiman. I think that I do see a little more, I don't want to call it downside, but I think it's a trickier pathway to number 2 than I think that some people outside see, right? Because of some of the changes, right? Losing a Ben Sinnott, losing some of the offensive linemen, but so to pick him to win the Heisman is a little aggressive for me, of course. But I think that, again, when you have a talent like that, and by the way, mixing it in with the running backs that Kansas State has and the defense and what we know about development, I mean, he has a chance again, especially I really want to increase it over the next 2 years, right? Especially sometime over the next 2 years. I think he has a chance to do some stuff that no Kansas State quarterback has ever done.
I'd agree. He's got some unique talents. Let's park our second break right here, and we'll get back. When we wrap up, we're going to talk about the ACC situation, and will the Big 12 grow again? Can we have some time off from this? I mean, it's getting a little exhausting.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to Studio 73.
I am Fitz in the Cats and Dogs studio, filling in for Big B. Hope he's enjoying Mexico and not causing too much havoc. I think he's at an all-inclusive, so who knows what's going on. It's probably out of hand. Let's get to it. The ACC, my friend, I think they're showing absolute signs of being like the Pac-12 right now. Not as imminent. We're not going to see any movement for a year or two at the earliest. But when you have programs actively seeking to leave, it's hard to stay united as a family.
Yeah, it's a strange situation, to say the least, right? To see two schools be so public, especially one in Florida State who has been extremely loud for years. It's interesting, right? I think that for Florida State and Clemson, the calculus is going to be, one, what are the chances that I can get into one of the two big conferences? Yep. And two, I mean, here's the reality, right? I know that there's been all these rumors about the Big 12, and certainly, I mean, when the rumors started circling about the four corner schools from the Pac-12 potentially coming to the Big 12, I was pretty dismissive of it, right? I didn't necessarily see a pathway or a benefit to it. So I do want to preface with that. Anything is possible. I think that the Big 12, if they were to land those members and any others, would have to come up with a pitch that would be able to say, we're not just going to land you $5 to $10 more million a year. We have a pathway to landing you $20 to $30 million more dollars a year. Now, I think part of that in the short term, right? That's one of the things that you hear about private equity and short-term capital and things like that, just to try to bridge some of those gaps. But I don't know. I'm still probably, relative to others, a little bearish on it happening. I don't know if this is something that's going to happen in the short term. But like you said, I mean, they have until August 15th to notify the ACC that they plan to get out by the 2025 season. If they don't meet that deadline, which is highly, highly unlikely for a variety of reasons, it pushes it down the road even more. I do think that the dynamic that everyone's also going to be looking at is, we don't have the exact dates and numbers and all that, but ESPN at some point in this contract has the ability to renegotiate parts of this contract if they want to. And again, so they were certainly such a big driver of what happened with the Pac-12. I think that if this truly does happen, I think it's less likely, personally, at this moment, that it comes because the Florida State and Clemson decide to pay $400 million in buyout money, and more likely that it's that ESPN or one of the partners says, hey, you know what? We don't want to pay for all of this. So I still think that we're very early in this process. It's not going to happen, like you said, like the way that the Pac-12 did, just because the ACC is locked into a contract through 2036. And Commissioner Jim Phillips was very aggressive about saying, you guys signed this contract twice. There's no way you didn't understand what you signed up for. But, again, where there's smoke, there's fire. So I think certainly in the next few years, it's going to be something to watch.
Well, I really hope the ACC can mend their fences. I mean, it's they've got to find a way. And I didn't think his demeanor at the ACC Media Days was really aggressive against one or two of his members. And I just thought that was something, well, I've never seen that before. But I understand his frustrations too. My friend, thank you so much for doing the Big 12 Insiders today. We want to have you on regularly. That means
thank you so much for having me.
Yep, you bet. That's it for this edition of the Big 12 Insiders. We got one more to go without Big B, and don't worry, he is coming back, or so he says. He'll be back next week, and I've got a great guest from off the 24/7 network and CBS family tomorrow. I think you're going to love it. Thanks for watching, everybody.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.